Okay, now, yeah, I guess that's interesting. I thought it automatically.
J'entends là-bas.
Okay, now you hear me, right? I apologize. You couldn't hear those the video I was showing. Okay, well, I would just encourage you to watch the video that I was showing, very strange, very strange. I mean, I didn't have to do this when I started the first class this morning, so it just automatically opened up the audio, but evidently I have to start the audio as well as the video. But okay, so let's go ahead and go to the cyber campus and start that. So we go to smart attendance, and we go to week 3 and smart attendance, and your smart attendance number is 460. 460 is your smart attendance number. So let me put that in the chat. 460 smart attendance. And again, this is generates a little nostalgia for last year when we were doing the everything on Zoom. But we're going to meet back on Wednesday in class. So like I said, I mean, I wanted to, it's just too early to have a vacation. We're only, not even 2 weeks into the semester. So, because we have, who knows what's going to happen in October, November, and December here at the university. So, and so let's go on then. And I think you all saw that email I sent you regarding the signing up for debate. So let me go to the Google Drive and open up the right debate sign up sheet, and then share the screen so you can all see that. And so we go here, and then I go to back to share screen, and you can see that this is the link I sent you to sign up on Google Document for a debate. And the debate is 15% of your final course grade. Don't be afraid of the debate. The debate is a practice session to help you polish your already wonderful language skills. And so let me see, has anybody else signed up for a debate? No. Oh, hey, look at that. Somebody signed up for Wednesday. Jun Suk Jo has signed up to have a debate with me on Wednesday. Hooray. In room 342 when we meet for the 1-hour class. And the debate topic will be to international students, the U.S. won the Cold War, pro or con. And so please, I mean, if you haven't, I'm just kind of bummed about not showing the sound in that video, but you might want to look through that history of the Cold War video there, that the Cold War segment I was showing you at the start of the class, if you want some basic information regarding the Cold War. So I sent you the notes, I posted the notes we'll go through today on the expansion of U.S. power, and reminded you that you should submit your paragraphs by Tuesday morning so that I can respond to them with comments and ask to let you make changes if necessary. And Jun Suk Cho will be con, and unless one of you signs up for pro before tomorrow, before Wednesday, I should say, I will be pro on the debate topic. And so this is, we should talk about how to organize the debate. And the debate will be organized using this framework that I will open up here. If I go to the, go here to, as I manage my way through the, all of my extensive notes here. And so I go here and make this bigger. And wait, I'm trying to share the screen here. So we go here and then we go to, okay, come on. We go to share screen. And this are the notes for how we're going to organize the debate. And so it's called the Lincoln Douglas format, because this is how American students are taught about debate. That debate is really important. That debate was something you should get practice engaging in, and this is the format that we will use in organizing this debate. And it's named after 2 American politicians who supposedly follow this format when they debated on the eve of the American Civil War, Stephen Douglas and Abraham Lincoln, when they were running for office to represent Illinois in the U.S. Congress in 1858, and the debate that they had was on slavery. They had a debate on slavery, and this is supposedly the format they followed, which who knows. Abraham Lincoln lost, by the way, but then he would go on to win the presidential election in 1860, and then the American Civil War would begin in 1861 after he was inaugurated as president after winning in November 1860. So this is the format that we'll roughly follow. Pro will speak first. So on Wednesday, since I will be pro, unless one of you signs up, I will be pro and I will speak for 6 minutes maximum. And then Jun-Suk Cho will speak for as Khan. Khan is negative, for up to 6 minutes. And then I will pro will rebut Khan for up to 4 minutes. That's me. And then Khan will speak a second time to rebut and conclude for up to 7 minutes. And then pro has the last word for 3 minutes. So that's me. So pro in this debate format speaks 3 times and Khan speaks twice. And you can have the chance, we will have the chance for you to ask questions, get a little extra credit by asking questions. So we're kind of loose on the time expectation. And again, we will be doing this in class in Taysal Hall, in K342 on Wednesday. And then I will ask you to evaluate the debaters, and I ask you on Cyber Campus anonymously to vote on who won the debate and anonymously to grade the debate. And keep in mind that the debate is meant to give you practice. So don't be afraid of the debate. I'm pretty easy grader on the debate. I mean, because I know this is, for a lot of you, this is some first time you've engaged in public speaking, not to mention using English as a public speaking medium. And so, but how do you get better? Well, you practice. And so I will ask you to evaluate anonymously on Cyber Campus the opening statement of each side, pro and con. And so you give 5 points to somebody if pro or con give a very effective, well-organized, constructive opening statement. If pro or con, they give you the main ideas clearly, but they weren't amazingly enjoyable. Then you might give them a good ranking. If they presented their main ideas and gave a decent introduction, that's satisfactory for 3 points. If there are problems, you can give them 2 points, limited. And if there are a lot of problems, you give 1 point, right? And then rebuttal. That's the second time each side speaks. 5 points. An excellent ranking goes to pro or con if they deliver an effective rebuttal, directly challenging and addressing each of the points made by the opponent, and they integrate, when they speak a second time, they integrate all of their ideas together to make their point. If they do a decent job, then they get good. If they do a job that gets they basically make their statement, then they get 3 points. If you can't understand you start to have problems understanding what they're trying to argue in their rebuttal, then you get 2 points. And if basically there's a lot of problems in terms of trying to understand what they're saying, you give them 1 point. And then also, we have the presentation style. Keep in mind, and I guess this is a good important as any to make this point here. Public speaking is always also many things, but it's also an opportunity for entertainment. And so if you're going to make somebody pay attention to you because you have to make a presentation to them, they want to feel like they are spending their time and energy in something they want to do. So you have to basically give them information that they really need. You need to make them want to watch you, right? You may need to make sure, and you want to stimulate them intellectually, right? So what does that mean? It means, simple things. You dress well, make it a formal occasion. You raise the volume of your voice. You perform, you're performing. And you want to speak confidently, and you want to look at the audience. You want to look at your audience. So I guess this is as good a point as any to make this point, that you want to prepare. The key is preparation. If you know the information that you're trying to present, your ideas, your thoughts, your arguments and your evidence so well that you don't need to read it. You don't even need to look at your notes because you've gotten that information so fully integrated into your thoughts. Then you're able to talk to the people. You're able to talk to your audience members. You can look at them. You can engage them. Like I'm trying to engage you right now over the camera, right? And it makes it easier for them to pay attention to you. And they're more likely to enjoy the experience. People want to enjoy observing public speaking, right? So that means, and if you make them like you in your presentation, if they enjoy watching you and listening to you, they're going to give you a higher ranking. They're going to vote that you won, right? Like I said, you can't explain human social interaction unless you bring in the role of emotion, right? Including politics and in politics. And so we'll be meeting in K342. So if you want to make a PowerPoint presentation, you can put it on a flash drive and bring it to class, right? You can bring it on a thumb drive and put it in the computer, or you can access it, however you want to access something. If you know how to do it through the internet, you can use YouTube videos, you can use YouTube, whatever you want to do, you can do, right? So it says audiovisual aids, clearly add to persuasiveness. So you speak articulately and confidently. Make sure you speak loudly. If you have trouble projecting your voice, then use the microphone. If people have trouble hearing you because your voice is very low or soft, they're not going to react well. They're going to get irritated. And if they're irritated, they're not going to give you a high grade. All right. And then also remember, like we said in all the other classes, you need to know your audience. You need to understand who your audience is. And the kind of communication we're doing in our class is academic communication. So you and I are academics, which means you make a statement, you have to prove it. You need to prove it with evidence. Evidence and logical argumentation. And logical argumentation, obviously, that's obvious. You have to prove, why should I believe what you claim to say is true, pro or con? But you also need to present evidence. And of course, everybody has written a paragraph and read on the chapter for the week. So they know the information in the chapter. So you can show them how your ideas or your points are related to the scholarly information that's available in chapter 2 of the textbook. Then you're more likely to convince them that your arguments and claims are more valid than the opponent's arguments and claims. Now, keep in mind the debate topics are vague and general, right? So, what is the debate topic? Again, let's remind ourselves what's the debate topic for well, see if I can find it here. Yeah. And then again, it's not to international students. The United States won the Cold War. That's the debate topic, right? What does that mean to win the Cold War? What does that mean? You decide what that is. Pro speaks for 3 occasions. Pro speaks first, and pro speaks last. So that's, I would say, is an argument, for an advantage for pro generally. Con just has to show you what pro is arguing is wrong or not convincing. So how do you know the U.S. won the Cold War? And of course, con as well, if you're going to prove me wrong, as I argued the U.S. won the Cold War, ideally it helps also to present an alternative. So if I'm wrong, then how were you right? How was your alternative explanation? The U.S. did not win the Cold War. What do you mean by that? You're saying the U.S. wasted lots of money and lives, money that could have gone into other projects, domestic and international projects of the United States? Are you arguing that the United States was basically creating the conditions for ongoing conflict after the Cold War? That the United States wrongly believes that it defeated a Russian version of Nazi Germany, because that's the dominant view to this day in the United States, in Washington, D.C., that somehow the United States successfully contained the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union wanted to do what Hitler's Germany attempted to do. But the Soviet Union was more powerful than Hitler's Germany. The Soviet Union won the Second World War. The Soviet Union had a more appealing ideology, socialism, than Hitler's racism. And they had nuclear weapons. Unlike Hitler, the Soviet Union's got nuclear bombs. And that the U.S. belief that somehow saved the world from the Cold War was a delusion. The Soviet Union, it was a brutal, cruel system inside the Soviet Union. We know this, but just because the system was brutal and cruel inside the Soviet Union doesn't mean the Soviet Union was trying to conquer the world. Doesn't necessarily mean that the Soviet Union needed to expand. And a lot of people do make that argument, right? That the Soviet Union, that kind of system, was so brutal and cruel that it had to justify itself. Why do we have to tolerate it? We, the people of the Soviet Union, why do we have to tolerate this brutality and coercion? Why? And the Soviet Union said, because I'll hurt you if you don't shut up. But also, by the way, we are also spreading the glory and influence of the Soviet Union around the world in this way, which means basically for Russia. And so the Soviet Union is basically a Russian version of Nazi Germany. And so, yeah, it might not be the most wonderful place, but it's delivering the pride in being a Russian Soviet citizen, that the Soviet Union could become the ruler of the world with your sacrifice of the people of the Soviet Union. So, if I were to argue against that, I would say, well, that's wrong. The United States didn't stop the Russian version of Nazi Germany. The United States was deluded, and it's created the conditions for the emergence of Donald Trump. And because there's a lot of people in the United States that resent this American influence all over the world, and the cost of that influence. Right, the United States, if it's going to be influential as a benign hegemon, right, because that was the topic of the previous week, right? The United States is a benign hegemon. What does it mean to be a benign hegemon? It means you have to have free trade with Europe and Asia. It means you have to let the Japanese and the Koreans and the Europeans export to the United States, and close American factories, because American companies can't compete with Korean car companies or steel companies or Korean shipbuilding companies. And you have to do that to be a benign hegemon, right? And that and a lot of Americans resent that. The Americans did that because they was part of containment of the Soviet Union. They had to have allies, and that means allies have to encourage them to develop. It means you have to open up American markets to imports from Korea, from France, from all over the world, and then later to China. The United States thought it would try to promote political change in China by letting China join the World Trade Organization over 20 years ago, and this caused American steel factories to close, American shipbuilding factories to close, American companies closed in the United States. Lots of Americans lost their jobs. Lots of cities and towns became became ghost towns with high unemployment and high poverty. Just look at Donald Trump's speech that he gave when he was inaugurated president in January 2017. He talked about American carnage, that this opening of America to the whole world, it created American carnage with closed factories, high drug abuse rates by white people in particular, because he was mostly concerned about white people who couldn't get good jobs because they didn't have college degrees. In the past, after the World War II, in the middle of the 20th century, anybody could get a good job in the U.S. as long as they weren't sick, right? I mean, I've heard amazing, I used to hear so many stories about the kind of lazy, dumb things that American workers would get away with. But America was so prosperous and so dominant in the world economy, companies could tolerate that kind of worker behavior. You can't now, right? Well, but a lot of Americans are resentful of that benign hegemony and its cost to Americans, particularly people that do not have high education, who do not speak foreign languages. And it led to the emergence of Donald Trump And, you can make the argument we came this close to a government, a dictator, a junta, a military dictatorship in the United States. Supposedly the Chinese, they contacted the American military. They were concerned that Donald Trump might order a military strike on China, that we came close to a direct conflict with China. All as a consequence of America's benign hegemony, claiming that it needed to do these things to be a benign hegemon and open up American imports, American market to foreign imports, and encourage globalization as part of being a benign hegemon to contain the Soviet Union. And now America is facing, the American elite, this globalist elite, maybe not with Donald Trump, but is still focusing on globalization and now confronting China. And this is all set up by this tragedy of the Cold. The Cold War was a tragedy. It wasn't a victory. It was a tragedy. Khan might argue. See, I'm helping you out, Jun-Suk Cho. Prepare for your debate on Wednesday. I'm going to argue no. U.S. did win the Cold War because unless somebody else signs up. So that's what you have to do. You have to be entertaining. You have to be illuminating. You have to be insightful. You have to make people want to pay attention to you, which means they have to like you, which means you want them to look at you. It means it doesn't hurt to dress well and be prepared in order to look most attractive as possible for that reason, right? I mean, like we said, this kind of activity is a form of, you can say that it's a kind of entertainment, right? There always is an element of entertainment in any of this. So think about entertainment. Okay. Okay. So we're going to get a display of this on Wednesday. So great. Okay. All right. So what are we going to do now for today, for the rest of today? And so talk about the expansion of American military power. So let me go to the notes. And did I open up the notes? Let me see to make sure that I opened up the notes. And I think we already did the exercise. I already gave you the cyber campus. Yeah, okay, we did that. That's done. So let me go to the notes for chapter 2 to make sure that we talk about. There's something else I need to do here right now, which we need to cover this because it's really kind of important. And I think I began to talk about this in other classes, and it's going to be a framework or a topic that we're going to use throughout the rest of the semester. And it's this notion of levels of analysis. Levels of analysis or levels of causation of events in international relations, including foreign policies, the state perspective on international relations. And I want to call your attention to an important book that was written, and I have it here, I think. Let me see if I can find it here. This book was published. I got to make sure that you can see this. So I'm going to share screen. This book was published in the 1950s by this person who maybe is one of the most influential international relations political scientists in the since Hans Morgenthau. Hans Morgenthau died in 1980. He died like 10 years ago or several years ago. But his PhD thesis was this book, which he wrote in the 1950s. I don't know if he fought in the Korean War, but this book was published in the 1950s. It was reissued in 2001, but that's the revised edition. The first edition came out in the mid 1950s, and I think it was his dissertation when he was a graduate student at I think Columbia University in political science, in the political science department. And Kenneth Waltz addressed a question in this book, Man, the State and War, Theoretical Analysis, in trying to survey the academic literature written. And again, this is just 10 years after the end of the Second World War. Why did World War II happen? So why did World War II happen? And he surveys and reviews the academic scholarly analysis of why this horrible thing called the Second World War happened. And he looked at all of the published literature that had been published since the end of World War II, and he put it into three different groups, or three different levels of causation. And let me go back to that PDF file, which I was showing you. Three different levels of analysis or causation. That might be a better term, but I always use the term analysis by habit. But in terms of explaining why the Second World War happened, he put the literature that had been published, 1954, right, was when it was published. So 9 years after the end of the Second World War, which means it was probably finished 8 years after the end of the Second World War. He said one group of literature explained the Second World War in terms of personalities and individuals. That the Second World War happened because Adolf Hitler. That's the main reason World War II happened. And so if they didn't say the main reason, that was the main focus of the research, of their study. In trying to explain World War II, they tried to analyze Adolf Hitler. And maybe also some other individuals who were important figures leading up to the Second World War, like, for example, the people that Adolf Hitler negotiated with, Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini, Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy, Adolf Hitler and Joseph Chamberlain, the prime minister of Britain, Adolf Hitler and the president of France, Adolf Hitler and the Soviet foreign minister Molotov, whatever. But looking at these individual, and they were all men at that time, and their interaction with each other, the negotiations with each other, the communications between them. And then there's a second group of, or second category, that's better, from a second category of focus in studying why World War II happened, that looked at what we call the collective state level. Like, they look at trying to explain why World War II happened by looking at German nationalism, looking at the nature of German politics as a whole, by looking at the nature of German society in the early 1930s or interwar period after World War I, that eventually gave rise to Adolf Hitler. That looks at the tradition of German militancy and German militarism. That looks at the weaknesses and problems that the other states confronting Germany faced, like, for example, the decline of Britain's relative economic strength compared to the rest of the world, the difficulty that American leaders had in pushing the American political class and political system to focusing their attention on what's going on far away in Europe and far away in Asia. So this category of analysis of the causes of World War II looked at what we call state level analysis, or domestic or national or level of analysis. The term that Waltz uses in his book is image, but that's not that's a confusing term. So I'm not going to use the term image. So first image, second image, third image, right? And then the third category of scholarly literature looks at the nature of the international political system in the middle interwar period. What's going on in the period between the end of World War I and the beginning of World War II in terms of the functioning of the League of Nations and its failure as the League of Nations to prevent war between Germany and its neighbors. The failure of the League of Nations to stop Italy from annexing and invading and annexing Ethiopia to the Italian Empire, and the League of Nations response and the failure of the League of Nations to make Italy leave Ethiopia. I already mentioned earlier, there's some bleed over between these different levels of analysis, or different categories, right? That the decline of Britain, the relative decline of Britain. There was still the British Empire, but the British Empire was no longer the dominant economic and political force in the world that it was before World War I. If only because the American economy was becoming more and more important. The American economy was becoming more and more dominant. And there was the breakdown in international coordination, cooperation to respond to crises the way there had been, say, during the 19th century, during what was called the Concert of Europe, that between the time of the defeat of Napoleon and the outbreak of World War I, there was an informal framework of negotiations and consultation among the European great powers to try to address their conflicts by coming together in diplomatic summit meetings, diplomatic international conferences. And this is called the Concert of Europe. And that this system was breaking down for a number of different reasons, including the fact that Britain was not as dominant. Britain's political power capabilities were no longer seen as overwhelmingly dominant like they were, at least on the sea, in maritime level, as it was after the Napoleonic Wars. Britain's economic capabilities were not as strong as they relatively were in the compared to the rest of the world before the First World War, with the rise of the United States. And so those are called the international system level of analysis, or little international system was changing. And what does Kenneth Waltz conclude by looking at these three categories of literature, of scholarly research, in terms of trying to understand this horrible thing called World War II? And what does he find? He finds, yes, they're all correct, but they're all incomplete, right? And this is the key point to emphasize from his book, that if you want to try to explain anything, the outbreak of World War II, the Cold War, the end of the Cold War, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Korean War, the American war against Iraq in 2003, anything that you want to explain in international relations, you should make sure that your explanation includes factors at all three levels of analysis, or all three levels of causation, because they're all important. You cannot explain the outbreak of the Second World War unless you include an understanding of Adolf Hitler. Okay, so you need to have that individual level of analysis. But there's more. Why did Hitler come to power? Because of frustrated German nationalism and German irredentism and the humiliation of Germany and German national identity after World War I. So you need these national state levels of analysis, right? And then, of course, the economic downturn, the Great Depression, that came to Germany, the skyrocketing levels of unemployment. And before that, there had been the great inflation that destroyed everybody's savings. And this, of course, reflects the breakdown of cooperation and coordination of international affairs at the international level. Because there was more of a willingness in the 19th century for the countries of Europe and their leaders to cooperate with each other to address a crisis, to prevent it from escalating. But by the interwar period, that ability to cooperate was breaking down, and there was an inability to cooperate, partly because of the different kind of different kinds of political systems that were emerging, right? Mussolini comes to power in 1922 through street fighting as a fascist in Italy. Fascist regimes or dictatorships come to power throughout Eastern Europe, except maybe in Czechoslovakia, but there were military dictatorships that came to power in Poland and in Hungary and in Romania. Spain had its civil war, and Franco came to power and would stay there until he died in 1975. And then Hitler came to power. And of course, these different kinds of political systems, and of course, the Soviet Union had its Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. It was a self-proclaimed radical government. So London, Paris, Washington, they did not want to consult and cooperate with Moscow under the communists, under Lenin and Stalin. So there was a relationship between state-level factors and trends going on and happening within these countries, and the breakdown of the international system level. There was a connection, and that's the key point. That anything that happens in international relations, you should include explanations at all three levels of analysis. And here's the key: you need to show how they're linked to each other. So, like, yeah, you need to understand Adolf Hitler and his supporters and their thinking and their understanding and their worldview. But you need to also explain how is it that Adolf Hitler's worldview became. I mean, Adolf Hitler was seen as a clown before he came to power, right? With his beer hall putsch in the 1920s to try to seize power in Bavaria through a military. He was seen as a fool, a clown. But then this clown came to power in how did that happen? Well, you need to look at these state level factors of analysis, how this guy that had been previously seen as a buffoon, as an extremist, as a marginal figure, how he was able finally to get enough support to take the top position in Germany. And to explain how he was able to do that, you need to also explain how the international system wasn't able to deal with the economic crisis that began in the United States with the stock market crash in 1929. That evidently the Great Depression began with the stock market in the United States crashing in 1929 because there was a real estate bubble of some sort, and the actors of the world, the leading states of the world, they couldn't come together to cooperate effectively to address it, and they did. 80 years later, in 2008, unlike in 1929, in 2008, 2009, you saw United States, Japan, South Korea, the Europeans, and even China, the People's Republic of China, under the communist government in China, they came together to deal with this global financial crisis and cooperated and coordinated and collaborated together to address this financial crisis, to prevent it from escalating into a new Great Depression. So from that perspective, you can say that the world did show some degree of learning because they did not cooperate like this in 1929, 1930. There were people who wanted to cooperate in the United States. J.P. Morgan was the leader of a big bank in the United States. He was desperately trying to work together with other European business figures to try to address this crisis, but there wasn't the political will in the United States government under Herbert Hoover before Roosevelt was president, and there certainly weren't going to be cooperation with the Bolsheviks in Moscow and Mussolini's Italy. I mean, they did not show this willingness to cooperate to deal with this, and of course, why they didn't show this ability to cooperate has to do with individual and state level factors of analysis. So of course, all of these different factors of analysis, they all have to be included, and you have to show how ideal, if you want to provide a satisfactory explanation for anything in international relations, you have to show, first off, this is the value of a theoretical framework. If your Halamani, if your grandmother asks you why the Korean War started, you've got to talk about Kim Il-sung and Syngman Rhee. We know that. We know you need to talk about, Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong. We know that. But then you also have to make sure that you remind yourself that you have to talk about the divided Korean peninsula and the divided Korean nation and Korean nationalism. And you need to talk about the Cold War. Now, you already know that. But do that for everything. If you want to explain why the European community became the European Union. You have to do that with these factors at all three levels of analysis. And that's the beauty of a theoretical framework. It points your direction in your thinking. You have to provide explanations at all three levels of analysis and show how they relate to each other. Okay, so the book, the textbook that we're using this semester, it primarily focuses upon this, right? It will focus on, like, for example, when they discuss the presidency, when Professor Hook discusses the American president, he will tell you about psychological analyses that have been done on Woodrow Wilson and Richard Nixon. And of course, those are important, and those are individual levels of analysis. And in the other chapters of the book, he's going to talk about the US State Department. He's going to talk about the US bureaucracies, the Defense Department, the intelligence agencies, the Congress, the executive branch more broadly in the United States that includes the Defense Department, the intelligence agencies. They're going to talk about also the media, social movements. Those are all factors at this level of analysis. So the book will tend to emphasize these explaining or focusing United States foreign policy analysis on factors at these two levels, individual and national state level. Bureaucracies, actors within the bureaucracies, the Congress, and so on. It's only at this chapter 1 and 2 that they're going to focus. He's going to talk much at all about this international system level of analysis, right? That he'll talk about structural realism and that perspective, or the realist analyses. He's going to talk about benign hegemony in chapter 1, right? Only in the first 2 chapters. The other chapters are going to focus more on individual and state level factors for explaining U.S. foreign policy and for U.S. foreign policy decision making. Okay, so let's have a little practice, right? So we have again the breakout. I'm using my own personal Zoom subscription, and I got the basic package, and it doesn't allow me to break up the class into breakout rooms on Zoom. So I'm going to have to use Cyber Campus to assign you to these 3 different levels, 3 different groups. And so I would like you to explain why Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered Russian forces to invade Ukraine in February of this year, in February 2022. And so I want to divide you into 3 groups. So let me stop the share and then go to Cyber Campus and go back to student monitoring. And so who's here today? I think I maybe should have stayed with the attendance. So we go back to here, and so we see this person is not going to be in class because they have visa problems. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I've got to make sure you can see this, right? So I go to share screen, go here. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 13, so we have 13 people. So I guess we'll just count off by 3. And so Chung Ji-yoon is here. Chung Ji-yoon. Hi, Chung Ji-yoon, are you here? Chung Ji-yoon. Okay, so Chung Ji-yoon, if it's heads, you're a 1. And it's tails. So Chung Ji-yoon, if it's heads, you're a 2. And it's heads. So Chang Chi-yoon, you're a 2. Blandine, you're a 3. Gerald Lucille Marie, you're a 1. Jolan Milo Samuel Elliott, you're a 2. Vladimir Kowalski, you're a 3. Tamin Remy, you're a 1. Park Ji-min, you're a 2. Park Chun-young, you're a 3. Is this going to work? Cho Chun Sok, you're a 1. Pang Shi Ho, you're a 2. Yi Chun Ho, you're a 3. This is going to be too complicated. I don't think this is going to work because I'm going to forget which groups you're in. So I think what I need to do is just do it like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you, yeah, let's go with that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so Park Ji-yoon, Blondine, Lucille Marie, and Cholan, Milo, Samuel, Elliott, you're 1. Okay, so that's the first 1, 5 here of this group is 1. So the first 5 in this group, you can see the screen share, right? So the first 5 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you are all 1. So Vladimir, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you are 2. Vladimir, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you are, so that's Vladimir, Tamin Remy, Park Ji-min, and Park Chun-young, and Cho Chun-sok. You're 2. And Pang Chi-ho, the third group, Yi Chun-ho, Im Jae-yoon, and Han Tae-wong. You're 3. So you're in group 1 and group 2 and group 3. And I would like you to communicate with each other in order to come to an explanation as to the different levels of analysis. So the first group 1, let me make sure you can see this. So go here. So we go to share screen. So group 1, provide an individual level factor for causation of analysis as to why Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Group 2, provide a state level of analysis of causation for Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2002. And group 3, provide an international system level factor level of analysis for the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Okay. So I think you can communicate with each other on Zoom. You can use the chat function to communicate on Zoom. To communicate, and I think what I should do is now flip a coin to find out who's going to speak for the group. So for group 1, heads, it's Yang Chuyun or Blondine, and it's tails. So it's Lucille is heads, and it's tails. So Jolan, Milo, Samuel, Elliott is going to speak for group 1. So help Samuel Elliott prepare to present what your group's conclusions are regarding the individual level factor of analysis for explaining the Russia-Ukraine war. And so for group 2, heads is Vladimir and Remy, and it's heads. Heads, it's Vladimir, and it's heads. So it's Vladimir is going to speak for group 2. Then that's Vladimir, Remy, Park Sumin, Park Chun-young, and Cho Chun-sok. Vladimir will speak for them for group 2. And who will speak for group 3? So if it's heads, it's Park Shi-ho or Im Jae-yoon. And it's it is Pang Shi-ho. Sorry, Pang Shi-ho will speak for group 3. So Pang Shi-ho will speak first for group 3. So help each other, communicate with each other through the chat or through the phone. If you can use the phone system, right? I think you have the Do you have the phone numbers of each other available on the cyber campus? Maybe not, but you can use the chat function on Zoom and come up with an explanation as to why Russia invaded Ukraine using those different levels of analysis. And I will also write a statement. So heads, let me see if I can show this here. Heads, I am in group 1. And I'm heads, so I have to provide an individual factor level of analysis for why Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. Do you have any questions? If not, then I will give you 5 minutes to come up with a statement. And I will write my statement now as well. Oh, thank you. I love initiatives. So Pang Shiho has sent out a chat to group 3 on Kakao Talk. So I didn't know you could do that. That's great. Thank you. Look what Pang Shiho came up with. This Kakao Talk function here. Thank you. Well done. Well done. I didn't know you could do that. That's really nice. So all right. So I guess maybe group 2 and group 1 can do the same thing. I don't know how you do that for in Kakao Talk. Maybe you know because you're more tech savvy than I am. Oh, should I? Oh, all right. Junsuk Cho is opening a group 2 for on Kakao Talk. Way to go. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, so let's go back to the Yang Chiyun and Blandine and Lucille and Milo. So Jolan, Milo, Samuel, Elliott, what are your thoughts in terms of trying to explain or make a contribution for understanding the Russian invasion of Ukraine from the point of view of individuals?
Yes, hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Historically, Ukraine and Russia are the same people, so we must rely on history to understand this war. So according to the 2014 Minsk agreements, pro-Russian regions must be neutral. According to Russia and several sources, Ukraine has been bombing these regions since 2014. Furthermore, Ukraine wants to join NATO. That's what the USA wants. So, but Russia does not want. Can we imagine a communist country at the gates of the USA, like Mexico? I don't think so.
Well, okay. First off, you have to be very careful. We're speaking in class here. I'm following pretty closely, as close as I can, debates going on in the US and elsewhere about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. And if you make the statement that that Russians and Ukrainians are basically historically the same people, you are going to get into some hostile responses. Okay, so just be aware of that. Ukrainian nationalists deny that they are the same people. They claim that they were occupied and controlled by Russian imperialists, that there was always a Ukrainian separate national identity that was suppressed by Russia. Just so you know, you got to be very careful because, like what I found, in terms of my work, my efforts in my work, we talk for a living and you get very little forgiveness if you make a mistake and you say the wrong thing. Of course, that's what the Russian leadership claims, that basically there's no such thing as Ukrainian separate national identity. It was created by Moscow. It was created by the Soviet Union for their own purposes of dividing the Russian territories to make Russia weaker. That's what they say, that there was never a history of a separate Ukrainian state before the Soviet Union broke apart in 1991-92. And that was an artificial creation. And then so having said that, your comments are interesting, but I'm trying to figure out how they relate to the question about the individuals involved. If you're going to focus on the individual level, you have to focus upon individual decision makers. Just like Waltz focused on Adolf Hitler, you got to focus on Putin. You have to focus on Zelensky. You have to focus on Joe Biden, because this is a course on U.S. foreign policy, right? I mean, this is an important question, and I'll show you how it's an important question. It's a fascinating question to me to ask. What would have happened if Donald Trump had won re-election in November 2020 and remained president of the United States for a second term? Would Putin have invaded Ukraine? And we can't be certain one way or the other, but someone could make the claim that if Putin was less and Moscow was less insecure when Donald Trump was president. I mean, I know you're all young people, you're in your early 20s. When Donald Trump was president, there was so much discussion in the American media, particularly those media critical of Trump, about maybe Trump was an agent of Moscow, that Trump was being controlled by Vladimir Putin, that they had blackmail information on Donald Trump, that he had done bad things with prostitutes in Moscow that was captured on tape, and and this was continually going on from 2016 to 2020, right? That's when Donald Trump met Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, Finland, that Vladimir Putin humiliated him, supposedly, according to the American corporate mainstream media, the newspapers and for-profit media companies covering the news in the United States claim that Trump was trying to ingratiate himself with Putin, that Putin was dominating Trump, but it's an interesting question. Basically, as long as Trump was the president, did Putin feel that there was less danger from the United States as long as Trump was president? It's a what if question, and I've been thinking about this myself, right? That Donald Trump criticized NATO. He criticized America's NATO allies like Germany for not spending enough money in their budgets on military expenditures, demanding that Germany and France and Italy meet their 2% of their gross national product. 2%, they should spend 2% of their gross national product every year on military, and they're not doing it. They're not meeting that goal, that commitment that they made years earlier to spend at least 2% of their gross national product on military, and they weren't doing it. He was criticizing NATO, and many people were commenting in the American media that maybe NATO's in danger, that the United States might leave NATO. If Donald Trump is reelected, he might leave NATO. He might pull the United States out of NATO. Emmanuel Macron even made a comment at one point that NATO was brain dead. NATO was brain dead while Trump, this was before the election in November 2020, because of Trump. There was no leadership. But the question that I then have is, does this show or this indicate that if Donald Trump had been reelected, that we would not have this horrible war in Ukraine today? Because Moscow would not have perceived as intense a threat from NATO and the United States under a Trump administration than when Joe Biden, old Joe Biden, who had been in the U.S. Congress for decades, who had been there during much of the Cold War, who since the 1970s he'd been a senator. He was the Mr. Establishment figure in the American national security establishment, who was there during the height and the ending of the Cold War, well, from the 1970s until now. That when he got elected, that Vladimir Putin and the Russian government, not just Vladimir Putin, but the entire Russian government concluded that, so Donald Trump challenged the national security establishment that wants to destroy Russia's leadership in the world, that wants to subordinate Russia. They put Joe Biden. Joe Biden has been elected, and so any hope we had that we could come to an agreement with the United States on spheres of influence is now it's gone, because basically Joe Biden has come into office, and he is going to respond and support completely NATO and reaffirm American support for its NATO allies and its Cold War and post-Cold War commitments. Was Donald Trump the peace candidate? In other words, was Donald Trump the presidential candidate for peace? If we have this war escalates, are we going to something horrible, even more horrible than it already is in Ukraine, to involve NATO and the United States? Are we going to look back and say that Donald Trump was the last chance we had for a peaceful resolution of the conflict between Moscow and Washington? Was Donald Trump really brilliant? Maybe we just don't understand how brilliant and smart and wise Donald Trump really was, because he understands everything that we're talking about here. That the conflict between Moscow and Washington is based upon mutual misperception of threat. that he was trying to bring about a détente strategy with Moscow, that he wanted to make peace with Moscow. He viewed the conflict based upon mutual suspicion rather than concrete substantive policy differences. The Cold War's long been gone. The Soviet Union disintegrated 30 years ago. Why are we in conflict with Russia? With all of its great oil and natural gas and other natural resources. There's so much money to be made in Russia. If we open up Russia to Western business investment, why do we have a problem with Russia? China is our main problem, supposedly. Well, Middle East is our main problem, not Russia, given the fact that Russia is a European Christian society. Was Donald Trump really secretly brilliant, but we didn't understand Donald Trump? Or Donald Trump was playing like a populist buffoon, because that's what you have to do if you want to win elections in the United States. You got to talk to regular people. You can't show your brilliance. You got to talk like the average American man. Are we going to say that in the future, looking back on this crisis, particularly if it gets really bad, even worse than it already is? And it could well get worse. It could get worse. I mean, there's news reports now about how Ukraine supposedly launched a counteroffensive using NATO weapons that the United States and its NATO allies provided with Ukraine, and they launched a counteroffensive, and Russians are retreating by the thousands. I don't think Russia's just going to accept this. They're not fully mobilized yet for this war, and I think they might well mobilize fully. And and become even more nationalistic. This is not a time to gloat. Russia is losing. No, this can get much, much worse. Much, much worse in various scenarios. And so that's what I wrote. I said, I was in group one. I wrote the following statement. Moscow invaded Ukraine because Vladimir Putin is under conflicting political pressure from different political constituencies to defend Russia's national identity and economic interests in Ukraine and the former Soviet Union more broadly. So he's got lots of economic and military and security constituencies in the police, in the army, in the business sector that want Russia to maintain its control and dominance in the former Soviet Union, or at least in the former Ukraine. Putin is not the most militant Russian nationalist within the political elite in Russia. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody in Putin's camp tried to kill that Alexander Dugin, because he was more militant and accidentally killed his daughter. Right? We talked about this. They were trying to kill him and they killed his daughter because they got in the wrong car. Well, he represents this more militant Russian nationalist groups in Russia. And they're angry that Putin is not mobilizing the country fully. They're still not instituting a mandatory military service. They refuse to call it a war, just a special military operation. They're not requiring people to join the military and go fight. They're not mobilizing society for war. And now they're losing. They've lost territory. They lost territory in Ukraine. Now, not everything. They lost a significant territory, but they've been defeated. They suffered their first setback. Well, not the first, but they suffered a setback. What is the Russian nationalist response going to be? Will there be a more intense nationalist response? Will Putin be deposed and removed and replaced by somebody worse? Are there people worse than Putin? I mean, Putin has done such a good job of eliminating anybody that could be a potential threat to him. I mean, I can't even think of anybody politically farther right who could replace him. But we're getting reports about how Putin is not the most militant. Putin and his supporters are not the most militant Russian nationalists in the Russian government, in the Russian authorities, among the Russian establishment. They're not the most militant. So we'll see how they respond. to NATO providing lots of weapons to Ukraine, United States and its allies, but primarily the United States, providing lots of weapons to Ukraine that they just use to retake a significant, like, what do they say, 11,000 square kilometers of territory, whatever that is, a few villages, a few small towns. How is Russia going to respond? Yang Chiyun, you have anything to add? Yang Chiyun? Yang Chiyun, are you there?
No, I currently don't have anything to add.
Blandine, do you have anything to add? Blandine Marie de Croix?
No, nothing to add.
No. Okay. What about Lucille Marie Grillard? Lucille Marie Grillard. Do you have anything to add? Lucille? Lucille.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, let's go to group 2. So Vladimir Kowalski. Vladimir.
Hello.
Hi.
So one possible explanation is the past of Ukraine, which was a Soviet satellite during a Soviet satellite country during the 20th century. So Russia feels that Ukraine belongs to him. Russia feels like it's a missing part of its territory. That's a part of the answer. And a domestic factor that may also influence the invasion of Ukraine by Russia may be the economic interest of Russia. Ukraine is an economic asset. It's a country which with developed agriculture, especially rapeseed plantation, fertile land, and access to warm seas. So since the relation between these two countries are fragile after the Minsk agreements and the annexation of Crimea, this reason plus other international and constructivist features gave birth to the invasion, according to.
Yeah. What about Russian nationalism? Like Vladimir, you're French, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you know French history, a little bit of French history, right? Do you remember, what did you learn about Alsace-Lorraine? How do French traditionally feel about Alsace and Strasbourg?
Mm-hmm. France feels had a feeling of revenge to Germany, which took this part of France. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's like a comparison, right? That for French nationalists, Alsace is French. For German nationalists, no, Alsace is German, right? I mean, this is the issue in Ukraine, that, as I told you, right, Russians have always been taught and believe that there's no such thing as Ukrainian national identity. That was something, if it existed at all, it was something created in what it was the Austrian part of Galicia, and that was part of the Austrian Empire around the city of Lviv, or what Poles call Lviv, in Western Ukraine. That territory, that might be separate. Territory might have a separate identity, but that was added to Ukraine in 1939 under the Hitler-Stalin Pact, or also called the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, in which they divided up Eastern Europe at the start of World War II, before obviously Germany attacked Russia, the Soviet Union itself. And that territory was taken from various countries and added to Ukraine by Stalin. But the other areas outside of that was always Russian, and this is a self-serving view. But in addition to the economic interests, the bureaucratic and police interests, and military interests, there is this nationalist level that typically political science people, generally speaking, have difficulty trying to understand, because nationalism is understood to be a very powerful force, but political scientists have difficulty agreeing on what it is, right? I mean, some people think nationalism is an ideology. I don't think it's an ideology. It's an intense in-group self-identification that people show through their behavior. And it's and you see the power of nationalism, for example, in like you try to explain this to Europeans and Americans, like with the way the Germans and the French fought over Alsace. That wasn't economically driven, right? It wasn't about money. It wasn't about iron ore in Alsace and the economic. No, it's about pride. It's about what is the territory of the French nation or the German nation. You see it in Serbia 30 years ago over Kosovo. I saw it in Bulgaria. Bulgarians claiming Macedonia. There's no such thing as Macedonians. Macedonia was something created by Tito when the communists conquered that part of Macedonia. They took it and they brainwashed those people to think that they're not Bulgarians, but that they're Macedonians, and they created an artificial Macedonian language, and there's no such thing as Macedonian. They took our land and just be Bulgarian land. I mean, Bulgarians get so emotional about this. It's just they're not as powerful, of course, as Russia, so they can't really do much about it. But they tried from 1912 until through World War II. They tried to take that territory back, and only now have they agreed. I mean, this is a topic for another class, right? For my European policymaking class. But I mean, American, or like, okay, you want to take a case of an American ally, Israel's annexation of East Jerusalem and what they call Judea and Samaria, the Palestinian occupied territories, the West Bank. I mean, that's another case of irredentism, nationalist irredentism. I mean, does anybody really think Israel's going to give that territory up? That's where Israel was born, according to the Bible. You know, King David, king of Judea, they call the West Bank Judea and Samaria. Do you really think they're going to give that up? It's not about money. It's about who I am as a Jew or an American or a Serb or a Russian or a Frenchman or a German or a Ukrainian. But, you know, Americans say, you know, okay, well, let me go back then to the okay, Remy, do you have anything to add? Remy Tamin?
Yes, no, it's okay.
And Chumin Pak Chumin?
No, I have nothing to it. Thank
Oh,
you.
you don't? What about Pak Chun Young? Pak Chun Young, anything to add? Pak Chun Young? Hello? Pak Chun Young? Pak Chun Young? 없어요. What about Cho Chun Sok?
No.
No. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I have here a list of foreign, I don't have it here. Yeah, a list of foreign policy motivations. But, you know, irredentism is a very powerful motivation historically in foreign policy behavior. And, you know, I mean, but, you know, Americans, they typically have difficulty understanding this because they've never been occupied and controlled by foreign powers. After they broke away from the British, they were surrounded by weak, small states, Mexico to the south, the Caribbean states that were colonies, and then they broke away and they're still weak, small countries. Canada was under control of Britain. They've not been dominated by other actors. They don't know what it's like to be occupied and divided and partitioned the way Korea was between North and South Korea. I mean, the Koreans didn't create that border between North and South Korea. The Soviets and the Americans did. And if you're a Korean nationalist, this makes you sad. This might even make you angry. Or Vietnamese nationalists. I mean, look how strong Vietnamese nationalist irredentism was, strong enough to beat the Americans. Or, you know, I mean, it's a very powerful force. I mean, you know, people wonder, do South Koreans really want to integrate with North Korea? Do they really want to unify the Korean nation? It'll be so expensive. I mean, North Korea is so poor. It'll cost billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars from South Korea to develop North Korea up to a level comparable to South Korea. Did South Koreans really want to pay all of that taxes to develop? And I think they'll do it the way, I mean, I remember 40 years ago when I was in graduate school, right? We used to ask the question, did the Germans really want to unify with East Germany? I mean, East Germany is so poor and, it's communist. And, I remember talking to German students, when I was in school, and they would say, oh, no, we don't want to unify with East Germany. Those people are so poor. And, we like our standard of living. And then when communism collapsed, Germany, West Germany, East Germany reunited in less than a year. By November 1990, they were combined in one state. And the West Germans have spent at least $1,000 billion transferred to try to develop East Germany since then. Probably more. I mean, that was an old number. When you think about all the money that's been transferred from West Germany to East Germany through social welfare programs, unemployment insurance, as well as infrastructure, building new roads, railroads, buildings, hospitals, but also the transfer of social welfare benefits from the rich parts of Germany to the poor parts. And the poor parts are the East Germany. That's the poor part of Germany. They spent thousands, many more than $1,000 billion. And they do it because we're Germans. They're all Germans. Okay. And finally, heads, it's Pak Shi Ho or Yi Chun Yong Ho for the system level, international system level explanations. So heads, it is tails. So it's Im Jae Yoon is heads, or Hwang Dae Yong is tails. And it is tails. So Hwang Dae Yong. Hwang Dae Yong.
Yes, Professor, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my personal opinion about some international factors of Russia's invasion is, in short, Russia in recent days, it is the U.S. is the hegemon nation, right?
It claims it is.
It claims. Oh, sorry, it's really hard to say this. Sorry. So, however, in such order, Russia is still one of the strong nations, and Russia wants to deal with as some strong nations, but U.S. doesn't do it because to U.S. the Russia is just a loser in a few decades ago. So Russia tries to prove themselves, and then that's just why that the Russia attacked Ukraine. And in international systems terms of view, if Russia attacks Ukraine, then Europe will try to stop Russia and try to remain remain allies with the US. So what I'm going to say is, as a result, the US manipulated Russia to attack Ukraine, and this purpose is to strengthen the US itself's own hegemony. That is all I want to say. I'm sorry that I'm really bad at speaking.
No, that was excellent. That was excellent. I don't necessarily. Let me just say that the picture that you're presenting is a picture or portrayal that I've heard elsewhere. That this was, and I'm sure you can find among different observers who see a threat from the United States, that the United States, that this is all part of a conspiracy in the United States to destroy Russia. And who would say that? I'd have to look. I don't think Vladimir Putin thinks, and the Russian government believed that it was falling into an American trap by invading Ukraine. Obviously, they don't think they were falling into an American trap. Who would think that they were falling into an American trap? Because what you're describing something of it's a conspiracy theory. The Americans set this up, and you find conspiracy theorizing many places in the world, particularly in places that have suffered imperial conquest and colonial control. Like in the Middle East, you'll find this conspiracy theories. These people really believe these wild, crazy conspiracy theories that, for example, the United States created ISIS. It created ISIS on purpose in order to justify America invading and reoccupying Syria and Iraq. I mean, even Russians, I've come across those statements in Russian media, in the BBC monitoring service that I showed you. Because look what happened. The United States then encouraged political Islam as a way by which to justify America's invasion and conquest of Iraq. And now they have like 1,000 troops in Syria. And the only reason why they haven't done in Syria what they did in Iraq and removed the Assad government in Damascus and put an American puppet in power there is because the Russians moved in. So there's Russian troops and American troops in Syria, along with Iranian troops and other troops. But there are like 1,000 American troops in Syria occupying the oil fields. And so some conspiracy theorists, like I think you find this particularly in people who like the Damascus government. They portray the United States created the Islamic State, encouraged that in order to justify America intervention, because look what happened. America now controls Iraq, and it's surrounding Iran, and by I mean, so I don't think the American, I mean, I'd have difficulty accepting that argument that there was all a conspiracy to trick Russia to invade Ukraine. You know, conspiracy theories require a level of coordination. I mean, that just doesn't happen, you know. But let's go on to the other. I want to make sure other people have a chance to speak. So let's see. Pang Shiho, do you have anything to add?
I have nothing to say.
What about Yi Chun Ho?
Well, we also talked about NATO, the expansion of NATO. So I think I'd like to add that. But is there a common idea that what Mr. Dayong talked about America and EU? So
okay, yeah. Thank you for bringing us back to the topic. Yeah, this international system level of analysis and causation, the expansion of NATO, right? Any explanation as to why Russia invaded Ukraine has to include the international system level factors as well, and that would focus on the expansion of NATO, right? Americans will say, well, you know, NATO should expand. First off, the Polish people, the Ukrainian nationalists, all of these people, they wanted to join NATO because they believed that Russia was weak in the early 1990s, but Russia would recover and it would try to reestablish its domination control over those people. So they desperately wanted to join NATO. You're going to tell the Polish people no? You're going to tell the Georgians and the Armenians who want to join NATO no? Please let us in. We don't want to fall under Russian domination again. And we need to join NATO to prevent falling under that cruel Russian Moscow domination that we suffered for so long. That's what they were saying. That's what the Poles were saying. After all of the suffering that we went through to help you defeat the Germans and then to overthrow the communists after 50 years of communist brutal domination, you're telling us we can't join NATO? How are we going to say no? How is America going to say no? They can't say no. Particularly if you're an American politician who wants to win elections. And there are a lot of people with East European background in the United States who vote in American elections. So this is, this is a class on American foreign policy. The international system level would be the main route by which to bring in the American case, because this is American foreign policy class, was the expansion of NATO. And America say, so yeah, I mean, again, but the assumption of that argument is that, Yeah, but the Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany, and NATO was a critical factor in explaining the defeat of that Russian version of Nazi Germany. So NATO's good. It's fundamentally a good thing. Expanding NATO is not bad. It's good. And anybody who opposes NATO is probably under suspicion. And that includes Moscow, that wants to rebuild its empire. And you can't, and you know, this is what the Estonian government and other leaders in the Baltic states are saying. You cannot let Putin win. You cannot let Moscow win in Ukraine, because if you let them get what they want in Ukraine, they're not going to stop with Ukraine. You never appease an aggressive power. You never appease an aggressive power, because if you appease them, like you did Germany in 1939, you just make them more aggressive. They won't stop with Ukraine. They'll go for Georgia. They'll maybe go for the Baltic states that had been part of the Russian Empire until 1918. And that's the dominant view in the U.S. today. And American political leaders like the Secretary of State, Lloyd Austin, they said that explicitly soon in the spring of this year. We want to weaken Russia so much you can never do this again. We want to remove Russia's power capabilities so they can never do this again. And many people said, you shouldn't have said that. It's going to make the conflict worse. But from his perspective, Russia's always been bad. They were bad from 1945 until 1991. And then they were so weak, they couldn't be bad. And then they got stronger, and now they're bad again. Because that's what they do. So that's the main focus here, right? Remember, if anybody asks you to explain anything in international affairs, why did the Korean War start? Why did the Cold War end? Why did Japan occupy Korea in the early 20th century? You have to provide explanations, a multifactorial explanation. There's never one single factor. There are going to be multiple factors at all three levels of analysis in explaining anything that happens in international relations. And that means if you can't think of something at all three of these factors and the levels of analysis, you need to think more. So, okay, but this book is going to focus on primarily after chapter 2 on these factors here. And, you have to show how they relate to each other. So, for example, all of these hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people whose career in the United States is connected with American foreign policy and American influence around the world, they are going to see the world in a way that allows them to feel good about why they should continue to get huge amounts of money from the U.S. government budget, government allocations, why they should continue to have their material benefits that they get from the U.S. Government. They're going to see the world in a way that makes America influence a good thing. And that means the enemies of the United States influence are very, very bad. So Iran's a problem, China's a problem, Russia's a problem, a serious problem, not just for America, but for the whole world. And there won't be much empathy to seeing the world from the point of view of Moscow or the point of view of Beijing or the point of view of Tehran. Not that their view is necessarily right, but if you're going to engage in conflict resolution to prevent war, which we need to do as a species in the nuclear setting, you need to know how the dominant prevailing views in the country that you are negotiating with, and the different groups of constituencies within it that have different worldviews. Russian economic class, they probably have a more peaceful, cooperative view of American foreign policy motivations than the Russian police and military, because they have a vested interest in cooperating economically with the West. And so those people are being targeted. I mean, we're getting these reports about all of these top-level Russian business people dying since the spring, falling out of windows. Like 8 top-level Russian business people mysteriously have died. Somebody's killing them. Oh, geez. So the situation is very fluid and very dangerous right now. Yeah, it's horrible, but it can get a lot more horrible than it already is. And it will be influenced by what NATO and the United States do, obviously. And keep in mind, we have to talk about Ukrainian nationalism. They do not want to negotiate at all with the Russians. They just want more guns from the West. And, you know, Joe Biden, he's apparently willing. The French and the Germans, they talk about giving weapons, but they have been more slow in providing support for the Ukrainians. They talk now rhetorically about this Russian threat to peace, but they're still, in terms of delivering actual weapons, they're very slow compared to the Americans. And that's intentional. So let me go to the notes here. And because we only have 9 minutes left. And I mean, you know, but again, the key point to take away from today's class is that the dominant prevailing view, not the only view, but the dominant view in the United States is the United States saved the world from a Russian version of Nazi Germany. And so America's leadership is benign. American leadership around the world is fundamentally benign. It's fundamentally a benign hegemony. It makes mistakes, but it's fundamentally a good thing. And those who oppose it are suspect at best. So there's this, of course, you know, Hook highlights, again, at this national state level, there's American nationalism is strong. When you talk about American exceptionalism, you're talking about American nationalism. America is an exceptionally influential actor because its democracy and economy are exceptionally effective. And that's due to historical reasons, right? It wasn't emerging out of a medieval kingdom the way France and other states did. It was founded by immigrants who wanted prosperity and freedom for themselves. You know, that there's all sorts of reasons why supposedly American influence in America is an exceptional nation. America is an empire of liberty. America should expand because its expansion is spreading this American exceptionalism to the West, all the way out to California. America's superior, and that America is not like those decadent, authoritarian, militaristic, aristocratic Europeans with their czars and kings and emperors and Junkers and aristocrats. And no, and they have a vested interest in promoting war because, you know, medieval European kingdoms were created to fight wars, and the ruling class ruled because they were the warrior class. So they have a predisposition to want war. But America is not like that because America never had a formal aristocracy and a king, supposedly. So America, during the first part of its existence, did focus on building institutions, on expanding out west, the U.S. really wasn't focused so much on international affairs, even though it was strongly influenced by international affairs. The U.S. State Department, U.S. Foreign Ministry, in other words, was a very small agency until the end of the 19th century. And then the U.S. was focused on trade. U.S. was really interested in making money through trade. And that was its main focus. by 1820, the US was already the 4th richest country per person in the world. So the world was paying attention to the United States because everybody knew that this was the places that you could go to make money, and you could make profit. Of course, the main focus of the United States was dealing with expansion out west and the conflict over enslavement and slavery as an institution in the United States. The US was more focused on its own internal problems and expanding out west to conquer North America. And then after the Civil War was over, the Americans, even before the Civil War is over, America's focused on making money. So America forcibly opened up Japan to trade, to make money. And this trade focus is important. I mean, there was, and then they would do the same in Korea later, right? At the end of the 19th century, using force to open up Korea to trade and commerce to make money. And but you know, the United States then was involved in its Civil War, and when the American North won the Civil War, that issue of slavery and the focus on developing America's power capabilities became even more of an emphasis or focus around the world. That America was then becoming more and more focused on international affairs, particularly leading up to, leading up to World War I. You know, again, in terms of nationalistic universalism, Americans believed that the expansion of American influence was a good thing. The term was manifest destiny. It is America's manifest destiny to spread American democracy and civilization all the way out to what would become Canada. California. The Americans attempted another war with the British after the Independence War in the War of 1812. It's part of the explanation for that war included an American desire to try to take Canada from the United States, but they failed. You could take Canada from Great Britain, United Kingdom, but they failed, obviously. And so then in the 19th century, in the concert of Europe, you had this system involving Austria, France, Prussia, Russia, and the United Kingdom. And then you had emerging powers in the United States and Japan, this concert of Europe. This was the international system level factor in the 19th century that broke down after World War I. The United States focused its efforts and its control and influence in the Western Hemisphere, declaring that, you know, it wouldn't want the Spanish or the French or to come back into their former colonies after they broke away in the 1820s, by the 1820s from Spain and Portugal and in particular. This shows the expansion of the United States and the conquest of half of Mexico in the Mexican-American War, again, opening the door to Asia was primarily focused on commercial interests. The so-called gunboat diplomacy, forcing the opening of Japan to do trade, and Japan's response was then to the Meiji Restoration, that, you know, the response to this challenge from the West had to be to develop the capabilities of Japan so that Japan could play this game as well as the European powers. Again, this focus on dominating Latin America. The U.S. sent military forces into the Dominican Republic in 1904, and they would do it again in the 1960s. Honduras, Cuba, Panama. There's no mention here of Haiti. The Americans occupied Haiti for a while as well. Again, for economic interests, the Haitians were not paying their debts and so on. They owed money to American banks. So the First World War, the Americans stayed out of the First World War. Woodrow Wilson campaigned about keeping the U.S. out of that war, but then the Americans got sucked into it after a couple of provocations that the Americans perceived as a challenge, plus the decision by the U.S. administration that Germany dominating Europe would be a problem. so that the United States should intervene to prevent Germany from being from dominating all of Europe. And so the U.S. declared war and claimed it was going to fight this war and make sure that the causes of this First World War would be addressed through Woodrow Wilson's 14 points. The Germans were not really ultimately defeated, but they agreed to an armistice because they knew they couldn't win now if the United States was involved. Wilson proposed a collective security system after the war, including the League of Nations. His 14 points, famous 14 points in his speech to the US Congress laying out why the Americans are involved in this war, proclaimed America's commitment to self-government, worldwide military disarmament, freedom of the seas, open markets, and prohibition against secret diplomacy. That was supposedly what the US was going to institute through the League of Nations, which obviously failed. US didn't even join the League of Nations, even though it played a key role in setting it up because of resistance to the US joining the League of Nations within the US Senate. And the US tried to compromise with the Kellogg-Briand Pact in 1928 that outlawed war as a means by which to promote national interest. That war technically became illegal. This was really reaffirmed in the United Nations Charter, but supposedly this was the first international treaty agreement that made war for the pursuit of advancement of national interest illegal. You could fight wars for self-defense, but that's it. And Germany signed, and Japan signed, they all signed, right? But then, this would be the justification for putting the leaders of Germany and Japan on trial after World War II. They violated the Kellogg-Briand Pact in the Nuremberg and Tokyo war crimes trials. Okay, our time is up. Anybody have any questions? The League of Nations failed, of course. Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931. Italy conquered Ethiopia in 1935. And of course, the League of Nations almost worked. They put sanctions on Italy to try to punish Italy for conquering Ethiopia. Those economic sanctions had a big impact on Italy, But then Germany began making moves to try to unify with Austria. And the British decided they wanted Italy's help in dealing with Germany. And so to get Italy's help in dealing with Germany in the 1930s, they removed the economic sanctions on Italy over Ethiopia. But of course, that didn't stop Germany from annexing Austria. Okay, that's all for today. And I'll see you in class on Wednesday, okay? No questions? If not, bye.
Bye.